Hello, is this the boyfriend rental service? I need a fake boyfriend for 2 hours. I am willing to pay double your rate.
At your service, ma'am.
Make sure to look super hot, okay?
Anything for you.
My name is Oliver Kong, and I run a business that technically doesn't exist on any tax document because professional fake boyfriend isn't a career category the government has caught up to yet. I want to be clear that it's not what it sounds like. I don't do anything untoward. What I do, specifically, is get hired by people, mostly women, occasionally men, once, memorably, a very determined 70-year-old grandmother, to show up at events and convincingly perform the role of a devoted partner for a few hours, usually to solve some very specific social problem. An ex who needs seeing, a family that needs convincing, a reunion that needs surviving with dignity intact. I charge by the hour. I have a 5-star rating on the discreet booking app 3 of my regular clients found me through. I am, by every metric that matters to me, extremely good at my job. Before we continue, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like this video to get more stories like this one. We really appreciate it. Now, back to the story. I ended up standing outside a fraternity house on a Friday night in October, waiting to meet a 23-year-old woman named Viola Bell, whose entire booking request had consisted of one line: need a convincing boyfriend for 2 hours, ex cheated, need him to see me thriving, will pay double your rate for someone who actually looks like he means it. I always appreciate a client who knows exactly what she wants. She found me first. Tall, natural hair in long twists pulled half up, wearing a deep red dress that had clearly been chosen with a specific strategic purpose in mind, and an expression that suggested she'd spent the entire walk over rehearsing exactly how unbothered she was going to look. "Oliver?" she said. "That's me," I said. "Viola?" "You're taller than your profile picture," she said, looking me over with the specific critical assessment of someone vetting a purchase. "That's good. He's 5'9" and insecure about it. Being visibly taller than him will do half my work for me." "I appreciate being hired for my height specifically," I said. "Give me the full brief. Name, backstory, how long we've been dating, anything he'd know that I need to avoid contradicting." "Killian," she said, "cheated on me 2 months ago with a girl from his econ study group, except I didn't find out until 3 weeks ago because they were apparently very committed to being discreet about it, which is somehow worse. We dated for a year and a half. He's going to be at this party tonight because his fraternity is hosting it, and I need him to watch me walk in with someone who makes him feel like the downgrade he actually is." "Understood," I said. "We've been dating for 6 weeks. I'm a graduate student, engineering, met you at a coffee shop near campus. I think you're extraordinary, and I have no idea why anyone would ever cheat on you." Which, for the record, is not a line. I'm simply stating an observation based on 5 minutes of knowing you. Viola looked at me for a long moment, something flickering behind her carefully composed exterior. "You're better at this than I expected." "I'm the best at this," I said. "Shall we?" The party was loud, crowded, and exactly the kind of environment I specialized in. Enough noise that nobody scrutinized conversations too closely, enough alcohol that my performance only had to be convincing at a glance rather than under interrogation. I kept a hand at the small of Viola's back as we moved through the crowd, laughed at things she said with the specific warmth of someone genuinely charmed, and watched, from the corner of my eye, the exact moment Killian spotted us from across the room. He was, I noted, precisely as described. 5'9", the specific tense posture of a man realizing his ex looked better than he remembered and had apparently moved on considerably faster than his ego had accounted for. "That's him," Viola said, not looking directly at him, which was, professionally speaking, the advanced level move itself. "By the drinks table. Don't look." "I'm not looking," I said, looking at her instead, which was, professionally speaking, the correct move regardless. "How am I doing?" "You're doing great," she said, and laughed at something I hadn't actually said yet, purely for effect. And I laughed back, and for approximately 90 minutes the plan worked exactly as designed. Killian approached around the 2-hour mark, right as I was preparing to make our exit, timing that felt suspiciously deliberate. "Killian," Killian said, cool, composed, the tone I'd have coached if she'd asked for. "'Tis Oliver." "Hey, ma'am," Killian said, extending a hand with a specific overcompensating grip of someone establishing dominance he didn't actually feel. I shook it with polite, unbothered pressure, because rattling him further wasn't part of the job. "Can I talk to you for a second?" Killian said to Viola. "Just for a minute. It's important." I watched Viola's composure do something complicated, a flicker of hesitation underneath her carefully indifference, quick enough that I might have missed it if I hadn't spent 2 hours specifically studying her micro-expressions for professional purposes. "I'll be right back," she told me, and let him lead toward a quieter hallway before I could say anything about it, which was, strictly speaking, not part of the plan we'd agreed on. She came back 20 minutes later, considerably longer than a second, her expression softer, more uncertain than she had been all night, and I understood with the specific professional clarity of a man who had watched this exact scene unfold at other parties for other clients exactly what happened in that hallway. "He apologized," she said, before I could ask. "Really apologized. Said the whole thing with the study group girl was a mistake, that he's been miserable since we broke up, that seeing me tonight made him realize how badly he messed up." She looked at me, something conflicted crossing her face. I think I might give him another chance." I want to say I handled this with the professional detachment my job requires. I did not. "You're joking." "I'm not joking. Viola, you hired me specifically because this man cheated on you for weeks without telling you, and the plan we agreed on 20 minutes ago was you thriving without him. And now, after one hallway conversation, you're telling me you're going back to a man who did that to you?" "You don't know the whole situation," she said, defensive now, arms crossing. "I know enough of it. I know he had a girlfriend and cheated on her for weeks and hid it. I know that whatever he just said to you in that hallway took him 20 minutes to construct after watching you walk in with someone taller than him. That's not remorse, Viola. That's damage control. You don't get to have an opinion about my relationship," she said, her voice sharper now. "You're literally a rental boyfriend. I paid you to stand next to me and look impressed. That's the entire scope of your involvement here." That landed harder than I expected, which I noted as a professional problem. "You're right," I said, keeping my voice level. "Enjoy your evening, Viola." I left before either of us could say something we couldn't take back. And I want to be honest, I did not sleep well that night, for reasons that had nothing to do with the job. I didn't hear from her for 11 days, which I told myself, unconvincingly, that I hadn't been tracking. The call came on a Tuesday evening, her voice smaller than I remembered it, none of the composed sharpness from the party. "I need to tell you something," she said, "and I need you to actually listen, because I was cruel to you and I've been sitting with that." "I'm listening." "I went back to him," she said, "for 9 days, and every single one of those days I watched him check his phone every time it buzzed with a flicker of guilt I recognized because I'd already seen it once before, and I told myself I was imagining it, and I wasn't. I found messages, not with the same girl, a different one." Her voice cracked slightly. "I spent a year and a half making myself smaller so I wouldn't be the difficult girlfriend, and then I spent 9 more days doing it again. And somewhere in there, I remembered what you said at the party, and I hated that you were right. And I hated more that I'd been cruel to the one person in that entire night who was actually honest with me." "Viola," she continued before I could say anything else, "I met up with him today. I told him exactly how much he hurt me, both times. I told him I spent a year and a half being a doormat because I was scared of being alone, and that I was done being scared of that specifically for him. And then I slapped him, which was probably not the most mature choice available to me, but it felt appropriate given the circumstances. And I walked away and didn't look back. I found myself, standing in my kitchen, smiling in a way that had nothing to do with professional satisfaction. "How do you feel?" I said. "Furious," she said. "Relieved. Embarrassed that it took me this long to see what you saw in 20 minutes at a party." A pause. I called because I owe you an apology. What I said about you being a rental boyfriend with no right to an opinion, that wasn't fair. You were the only person that whole night who told me something true instead of something I wanted to hear, and I punished you because it was easier than admitting you were right. Apology accepted, I said. For what it's worth, I wasn't angry because my professional opinion got dismissed. I was angry because I watched someone genuinely extraordinary about to make herself smaller again for someone who'd already proven he didn't deserve the space she took up. There was a pause on the line, long enough that I wondered if I'd said too much. "Oliver?" she said, quieter now. "Can I ask you something unprofessional?" "I can ask you anything." "Was any of that night real for you? Or was I just paying a very convincing actor to make me feel good for 2 hours?" I thought about the question longer than the situation probably required because I wanted to actually answer it honestly rather than give her whatever version sounded easiest. I've done this job for 3 years. I've been a convincing boyfriend to a lot of people for a lot of reasons, and I've never once had trouble keeping the performance separate from anything real, because there's never been anything real to separate it from. That night was different. I spent 2 hours laughing at things you said because they were genuinely funny, not because the job required it. I got angry at that party because something about you specifically mattered to me beyond the fee, which has never happened before, and which genuinely alarmed me at the time. I paused. So no, it wasn't entirely an act. I just didn't have the professional framework to say that out loud until you asked. The silence on the line this time felt different, warmer, charged with something neither of us had said yet. "I think I have feelings for you," Viola said, her voice unsteady in a way I hadn't heard from her before. "Which is insane, because you were a service I hired and I've known you for exactly one night and one very embarrassing phone call. But I've thought about you every single day for 11 days, and I don't think that's just gratitude." "I think I have feelings for you too," I said, "which is professionally speaking an enormous liability. And personally speaking, the first time in 3 years I've genuinely wanted to see someone again without an hourly rate attached to it." "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now I take you on an actual date. No booking fee, no script, just two people who happen to have already survived the worst possible version of a first meeting and have nowhere to go but up from there." She laughed, the real one, unguarded, the one I'd heard exactly once at the party before everything got complicated. "That's either the most romantic or the most ridiculous pitch anyone's ever made me." "I contain multitudes," I said. "Saturday?" "Saturday." The first 2 months of actually dating Viola were, against every expectation I'd built over 3 years of professionally curated relationships, the easiest thing I'd ever done. There was no script to follow, which turned out to be considerably less frightening than I'd assumed it would be, mostly because I liked her enough that the honest version of myself was already the version worth showing. I hadn't fully retired from the job, though, a fact I'd mentioned early on, expecting it to be a minor logistical detail, rather than a landmine since the bookings had slowed considerably and mostly consisted of low-stakes work now. Family events, awkward reunions, nothing that resembled the emotional stakes of that first fraternity party. The landmine detonated on a Thursday evening 6 weeks into us actually dating, when I came home from a booking, a client needing a convincing +1 for her sister's engagement party, nothing more complicated than that, to find Viola sitting on my couch with an expression I recognized immediately as trouble. "How was your date?" she said, and the word landed with a deliberate edge she clearly wanted me to notice. "It wasn't a date," I said. "It was a booking. Client's name is Renata. Her sister's getting engaged. She needed someone to run interference with a pushy uncle who keeps asking why she's still single. I've told you about this one before." "I know what it was," Viola said. "I just don't love watching you go get dressed up and hold some other woman's hand for money while I sit here trying to remember that you're coming home to me and not to her." I sat down across from her, trying to gauge how serious this actually was. "Viola, this is the job. You knew about the job before we started dating. I told you on our first real date that I wasn't planning to quit. I know what you told me, she said, and her voice cracked slightly in a way that told me this wasn't really about Renata at all. Killian cheated on me for weeks and I didn't notice, Oliver. I've replayed those weeks so many times trying to figure out what I missed. And now I'm dating a man whose actual job is convincingly performing intimacy with other women. And I can't always tell the difference in my head between you doing your job and you doing the thing that broke me the first time. That's not fair, I said, feeling something tighten in my chest. I'm not Killian. I've never once lied to you about where I am or what I'm doing. Everything about this job is transparent. You know every booking before it happens. You have my location the whole time. There's nothing hidden here. I know, she said. I know that logically. I just need you to quit anyway. Find something else. I can't keep doing this, watching you leave to be someone else's boyfriend for the night, even if it's fake, even if it's just business. It makes my chest hurt every single time, and I don't think that's going to change just because I understand the logic of it. Something in me, which had been patient through the entire conversation, finally snapped more sharply than I meant it to. You don't get to do that, I said. You don't get to come into my life 6 weeks in and tell me to quit something I've built for 3 years, something that's paid my rent and put me through the last 2 years of grad school, just because it makes you uncomfortable. I understand you're scared. I understand Killian broke something in you that I didn't break and shouldn't have to pay for. But I am not going to abandon my entire livelihood because you're projecting an old wound on a job that has never once given you an actual reason to distrust it. Viola's face did something complicated. Hurt, then anger, then a kind of brittle defensiveness. So my feelings don't matter as much as your paycheck. That's not what I said, and you know it, I said, standing now, pacing slightly, trying to keep my voice level and mostly failing. You don't get to unilaterally demand I dismantle my career 6 weeks into dating you because of something someone else did to you. That's not how this works. That's not fair to me. The apartment went quiet, both of us breathing harder than the moment technically required, and I watched something crumple in Viola's expression that made the anger in my chest deflate almost as quickly as it had risen. You're right, she said, quietly, after a long moment. I know you're right. I don't know how to make the fear stop, Oliver. I don't know how to watch you walk that door dressed up for someone else and not feel like I'm 18 months back in a relationship where I was too scared to ask questions until it was already too late. I crossed the room and sat beside her, taking a breath before I spoke again, trying to find the version of this conversation that wasn't just two people defending their own positions. I'm not going to quit, I said, gently now. Not because your feelings don't matter, but because you fell for the version of me that includes this job. And I don't think either of us would actually be happy if I became someone smaller to manage a fear that isn't really about me in the first place. I took her hand. But I hear you, and I want to actually fix the thing that's real here, which isn't the job. It's that you don't fully trust yet that I'm not going anywhere. So let's fix that part. Ask me anything whenever you need to. Call me during a booking if you need to hear my voice. I'll send you a photo from every single client meeting if that's what actually helps. Not because I think you're being unreasonable, but because I understand exactly what almost losing yourself to someone dishonest does to a person. And I am not interested in being one more man who makes you feel unsafe in your own relationship. Viola looked at me for a long moment, tears gathering that she didn't quite let fall. You'd really do that? Send me photos, take my calls, all of it? I would do considerably more than that. I would do it for as long as you need it, because I'm not leaving, Viola. Not for a booking, not for anything. I know that's easy to say and harder to trust after what you went through, but I'm going to keep saying it and keep proving it until the fear actually believes me too. She let the tears fall then, finally, leaning into my shoulder with the specific exhausted relief of someone who'd been bracing for a fight and gotten reassurance instead. I'm sorry I asked you to quit. That wasn't fair. You were scared. Scared isn't the same as wrong to feel something. It was just the wrong solution. We'll find the right one instead. Together, she said. Together, I agreed. 6 months later, standing in my kitchen while Viola argued, loudly and with great conviction, against my choice of paint color for the apartment we'd started sharing 3 weeks earlier, I thought about the specific irony of a man who got paid to perform relationships for a living somehow ending up in the first real one that ever actually mattered. "You're supposed to agree with me," Viola said, gesturing at a paint swatch with the same intensity she once used to strategize an ex-boyfriend takedown at a fraternity party. "That's the whole job of a boyfriend." I retired from the paid boyfriend job 3 months before we met. This version is unpaid and considerably more opinionated. "I like the paid version better," she said, though she was smiling, and crossed the kitchen to kiss me anyway, the specific easy affection that had nothing performed about it at all. "You hated the paid version," I said. "You recall me calling you a rental boyfriend with no right to an opinion, if I recall correctly. And then several months later, you tried to get me to quit it entirely because it made your chest hurt." I was wrong about a lot of things during those 2 conversations. That happened to be some of them. "You still get jealous sometimes, I noticed, when I mention a client, even now." "Less than I used to," she said. "You've spent 6 months proving you meant what you said on that couch. I still feel the old fear sometimes, but I trust you more than I trust to fear now, which took a while, but we got there." I thought about a fraternity party 8 months ago, a booking request that promised 2 hours and a fee, and the specific way an entire career built on performing convictions had quietly, without my permission, turned into the realest thing in my life. And the couch conversation months later that nearly broke something before it had the chance to become permanent. "For the record," I said, "I would have done that first night for free if you'd asked." "I know," Viola said. "I figured that out 6 weeks in. You're a terrible businessman, Oliver Kang, genuinely bad at monetizing your own feelings. It's a specific weakness. I'm working on it." "Don't," Viola said, kissing me again. "I like it exactly the way it is." If you loved watching Oliver and Viola go from a paid arrangement to the real thing, surviving jealousy, old wounds, and one very honest argument along the way, smash that like button, subscribe for more K-Afro Narratives, and let us know in the comments. Do you think Oliver was right not to quit his job? Do you think Viola's feelings were valid? Tell us where you're watching or listening from too. See you in the next one.